So I discussed in previous videos about our own perception of reality, how subjective it is, how we construct it by projecting what the brain expects to see out there, in here, right, in our own minds. And I'd like to double click in this one on how crazy it is that our own sense of self is anything but ours. At least not created by us. It's forced by others onto us. It's a crazy thought, but think about it. What is education? What is culture? What is the world doing to you for the whole life, ultimately, right? If you don't, wake up to this fact. We are being literally programmed with thoughts and ideas and the beliefs of others since a very young age. And I'm not talking here, of course, about any strange conspiracy theory or something like this. It's just the nature of things. We derive our sense of self, who we think we are, who we believe we are, who we see ourselves being in the intimacy of our own minds, based on what our family tells us we are, based on what our friends, our colleagues, the world at large tells us we must be, right? And all these labels, that most of them are inherited, all these labels, they form this image that you have about yourself. The perception that you have about yourself is anything but yours. Is simply the total accumulation and the result, ultimately, of a lot of skewed perceptions projected onto you by the entire world. Which is a crazy thing if you think about it, but it is true. You navigate your life and your understanding of the world based on what you observe others to understand from the world, based on other people's projections onto you about what you should do, what you should believe, how you should behave. And then we inherit that for the survival need, ultimately, of belonging, of being part of a group, of not being strange or a weirdo or someone who is just not agreeing with anything or with us. You're not part of us because you're not thinking like us. So, in fear of not violating people's perceptions about us, we are giving up our soul, ultimately. We are giving up who we really are, and even the pursuit of this project, right? This investigation altogether, we give it up for this kind of survival-driven payoff of feeling part of the community, of feeling accepted by others. It's not a mistake and just a random fact that not enoughness, this feeling of not being enough that we all share as a species, I guess, I'm pretty sure that we all do share that, most of us at least. This feeling of I'm not enough is not ours. It's inherited. It comes from the projection of the entire world onto us, so that we raise to the point and to the level of being finally accepted by the world, because we do enough for the world so that we can, lastly, live in peace with ourselves. So this circular, fucked up, ultimately vicious cycle keeps us trapped in a prison that others help us build for ourselves, right? These are the narratives and the unconscious beliefs that run our entire lives. This is how we derive our sense of self. This is how we build our own identity, who we believe we are, not based on our own understanding about ourselves, our true nature, our divine nature, right, as well. Our dual ability to both interact with this world and not be part of this world fully, right? We come, we go, we come, we go. We are like waves in the ocean. We are just popping up for 80 to 100 years if we are lucky, and then we go. And then end of story. Then it's like nothing happened, right? And we make it like this is everything. This is so serious. This is who I am. But no one cares about investigating this kind of deep questions and deep truths about themselves and the nature of reality and the quality of life and living fully, because everyone is so damn confused about the whole project. And the incentives to not go that route are so big and the temptations are so high that it doesn't make sense to go in that project. And yet, real freedom, real peace of mind, real transformation, real growth in life happens by starting to poke at this strange default inherited foundation of understanding who we are. When the world tells me who I must be, then I have to comply. Because if I behave in a certain way for 30 years, which is my case, and then I start to behave differently because I evolved my own understanding about who I am, I developed my own and I evolved my own values. And that implicitly changes the way I present myself in the world. It is ultimately scary for people. Because if someone has to change their own understanding about who I am in relationship with them, then it means that they have to change. Their own projection about who I am is their own projection, is part of who they are. So I am someone who believes that you are that person. I am someone that believes that you are in a certain way, and you have then to act in that very way so that I don't have to change my own perception of you, which I am familiar with and intimate with, right? I don't want to change, because even if I have to change my projection about you, my projection is mine. Who are you to change so that I am forced then to change my own projection about you, so I don't feel, threatened anymore. So for this unconscious need of other people to find familiarity and comfort in you and your behavior, you are losing up on finding yourself truly in life, because you prefer to comply with other people's beliefs about you and honor those to the detriment of creating new beliefs and a new identity for you that is conducive to your own goals, that helps you grow on your own terms, that allows you to actually be free for once and enjoy even the contradiction that you are provoking all around yourself. Be okay with seeing confused stares of people when you're saying something that they might not expect. Change their map. Force them to change their map, because they forced you to change yourself to accommodate their own maps and their own insecurities and their own problems, right? This is how the world works. And we are so used to serve everyone around us and play their game that we believe that's our game. We believe that our game is simply to comply and play along with whatever games others force us to play so they can feel good about themselves. Isn't this crazy? Isn't this like a completely wrong way of living? And still we do it so naturally? How can it be that our own sense of self, that our own identity, which should be something very intimate, is derived from what others believe about ourselves, what others thing that we should do or we should believe so that we are okay, so that we are accepted, right? So, in engineering, we have this type of modern architecture. It's called event-driven architecture. Right? With the advance of cloud computing and serverless computing, you basically orchestrate the way you react to some sort of digital event out there in a way that's fully driven by a certain event, right? So something, a person, a user clicks a button on the phone, that thing is an event, which then means something, right? In the context of that application, it triggers a whole amount of processes in the backend computing, then spans a lot of stuff and gives you some outcome, right? In terms of user experience. And sometimes I want to do analogies from technology to real life, because first of all, this is how my brain thinks sometimes, in feedback loops, and I have like a systems thinking, and I'm thinking about the inputs, and I see my mind as a system, and I try to control the inputs because I know the mind has these predispositions and there is this entropy in the system that I have to account for. So this way of thinking helps me a lot, and it just popped up in my mind that we are this kind of compute in this kind of event-driven architecture, right? So if you imagine the world outside, right? The world outside triggering us, right? Something happens, an event out there. We talked already about the fact that everything out there ultimately happens in here. So I want to show you how we are just reacting to the world, and then we develop our own sense of self and our own identity based on what happens in the world, right? So when an event happens, and something happens out there, so let's take this hand, right? So an event happens here, right? We are triggered by something. Most people, including myself, for most our lives, because of how we interact typically with the world and how we develop our own way of responding or reacting rather to those kind of events, we are forming patterns, right? That event happens, then it's a trigger. The event triggers us in a certain way. If the event is meaningful to us, of course, it will trigger a certain way of framing the meaning of the event. We identify certain elements of it. Again, I gave the example with a car crash, right? If there is an event there and I see an accident, a car crash, but the car is not mine, I am not triggered in the same way that I would be triggered if the car is mine, right? If the car is mine, between the event and the reaction, right? So let's imagine the event here and my reaction to it, an actual, like result, an action in the world. I have no gap here. If the car is mine, very likely I will default into the kind of behavior that is very typical for me when something that is mine, right, is threatened, is at stake. Because there is such enforcement because of all the different times we reacted impulsively, aggressive maybe, and scared and out of fear when something of ours, right, something ours that we attached our identity to happened outside, that we have really no delay between the trigger and our reaction to it. If it would be another car accident, like a car which is not mine, I would see the event. But between the event and my anger, I would not even experience anger necessarily, right? Because it's not me, I'm not threatened. I would still have like 3 more steps here. I would have the ability to make a judgment about what happens. The pattern that I will recognize would not force me into a certain pattern of behavior immediately, because I would have some gap. I would have some detachment, some emotional detachment from what's happening, right? It's other person's car, I will just experience something. Maybe I would be afraid that, people might get hurt, but I would not get threatened in the sense that it's my car, look what you did. So then the pattern here, I would be conscious of it. I would think about maybe calling an ambulance or thinking of calling the police. I would not get angry, right? The thoughts then that accompany the thinking pattern and the emotions attached, right? So these three things, my judgment about the experience, my thoughts, my emotions, this will be processed in a bigger gap between I will actually do something about it, right? So this is the trigger, this is the event. This is the event, the trigger, and this is the reaction to it, right? So in our day-to-day, most of the things that happen to us that we claim are related to us, right? My car, my house, my job, my friend, my kid, my wife, my anything. We typically are being triggered right here, and then we don't have any kind of gap between our reaction to the trigger. So the event happens out there, then in a few milliseconds, the event gets internalized. We translate what's happening there based on our senses into our brain, and the mind adds this thinking, adds this projected overlay of what does this mean? What is this event made of? Who is it involved? What's the implication on me, right? How am I impacted? What's my identity? How is my identity suffering, right? Imagine someone makes a judgment about you. Someone makes a statement, right? They are saying some words, right? You are not that good, right? Or whatever. That's a saying. That's someone's words expressed in the ether, right? That thing, until, it takes a few milliseconds for that event, that statement, to be recognized, through your ears, then into your brain, and then your mind makes of those sounds this statement, which makes, which attaches this colorful meaning on it, right? You are not that good at what you're doing, right? If someone says that to you, you are not hearing sounds, you're not hearing words, you are hearing the attack on your identity about how you actually feel about yourself and what would those sounds mean to you, and then you react, right? Because you want to protect your identity. So you don't have time for this, like the gap in between the trigger, the event itself, and your reaction to it. You feel this emotional tension and the need to defend yourself or to prove them wrong, right? Immediately. You don't have time to think about constructive ways of interpreting the statement, or thinking about what would they maybe have to go through today to make such a mean statement, right? And the accompanying emotions around this new way of thinking. No, you don't have that gap. You are an automaton, right, in a way. So in this event-driven architecture, where the world is the whole architecture, and then that person is, the event, you are being triggered like that. You have zero means to actually respond differently than, some sort of solution which is already built and meant to respond in a very predictable, deterministic way. And isn't that fascinating? Isn't that fascinating that someone who ultimately doesn't care about us that much? Because if they would care about us, they would not hurt us. If someone says to you that you're not very good at something, that's an identity statement. You are not very good. It's not meant to help you with anything, it's meant to hurt you, right? This is not the kind of feedback that you would give, for example, to a friend or a colleague or someone in your team, right? If you would evaluate them, you would not give that because you don't know what they would do with it. There is no practical way out of that statement, right? You are putting them, you are projecting this kind of idea onto them so they can suffer, and you can feel maybe good about the fact that because of what they did, you ended up, having your own problems, right? And then you take it back to them. So it's like a throwback judgment based on what you're experiencing. So what's the way out of it, right? Why can't we get out of this? Why are we subject to always being triggered by external events and by the projections of people who don't care about us? How absurd is that? How absurd is that we live our entire lives in this vicious cycle of reactivity based on what people, insecure people, think about us and project onto us, which is ultimately not meant to help us in any way. And we are serving them at the same time, right? By me acting in a predictable way based on someone's ability to push my buttons, right? We use this expression. They are very able to push my buttons. What does it mean? They know how you suffer, what hurts you, and they do those things exactly so that you can suffer. And someone who wants to make you suffer willingly, even unconsciously, is not someone that you would like to entertain a relationship with or develop a relationship with. And there are stages, in the evolution of consciousness and your own maturity and emotional evolution ultimately to relate to this kind of persons. Because before going on the journey of not being impacted by those kind of comments in a constructive way, not in an avoidant way, right? Because initially your temptation would be to say, I don't care about them anymore. I don't want to hear about you. You are not, you don't care about me. I won't care about you, so you can say whatever. This is emotional detachment, and it's also some sort of a form of avoidance. So the next step would be to recognize the fact that they can't do better, right? If they could do better, they would do better. And then you realize that this is the human condition. Everyone is doing the best they can at all times. If someone is telling you that you are not good and they are casting judgment onto you so naturally, so effortlessly, they have their own ways of reacting to situations like the one that you created, so that they don't have any kind of gap between the event in which you might have contributed and the reaction to it, which is saying you are not very good. They don't have this kind of gap of awareness to recognize that that simple statement will not help you, will hurt you, right? So you start to understand that everyone is doing their best they can. And you start to develop compassion for people for not being able to do better. You start to realize that, in a way, you are alone in this world. Not because you are isolated, not because people don't care about you and don't love you, but you are alone in the sense that it's your sole responsibility to make the most out of this worldly existence, to take the best you can for yourself from it, based on deep understanding of yourself first, and then of the entire world. Because based on that better and better understanding of everything, you get to not cause the same kind of suffering that that person is causing you when they are saying you're not good at what you're doing. This is just an example. And I'm using it as an example because I know that this is something that is very triggering for people who are perfectionists, for people who want to prove themselves, for people who derived ultimately, like most of us in the end, their sense of worth based on other person's appreciation of them, right? When someone tells you that you are not good, and they cast this kind of identity statement onto you, you suffer a lot. So what are you doing with that? What do you do with such statements? You recognize that they are not able to give you better feedback than that. And you start to develop compassion, first of all towards them, and then towards yourself for punishing you your whole life for having to comply with some sort of absurd standards imposed onto you by the world. And it started in a way that is so sneaky that we never really understand how to fix, even when we are adults. Because it starts with closest people around us, with our first grade teacher, with our parents, with our closest friends. And again, they are not consciously projecting their own lacks and limitations onto us. We are also doing it to others without knowing. But we are doing it nevertheless. And when we realize that this is how we derived our sense of worth, based on what other people thought about us, thought about that we should do, thought about, their own projections, basically, their own fears, their own limitations, their own aspirations. We are living those on their behalf, for them, right? So they can feel that they lived like another life, or that they avoided through our own, behavior, something that they wanted to avoid their whole lives and they were not able to. And now they feel some relief, right? Now they see that they had this impact. They're forced, a forced impact ultimately onto someone by telling them or projecting onto them things that, ultimately ended up manipulating the behavior of that person, right? They feel a bit better about themselves. So we have to be very careful about what triggers us and why, right? So if you want to really understand yourself and not need to derive anymore your own sense of worth from what others think about you, first of all, try to see how what other people think about you impacts your own thinking about yourself. Because that should not be the case, right? You are a unique individual. You are creating your own reality based on your own projections onto the world. And other person's projections onto you are your interpretation, ultimately, of what they think about you. And it's still, in a way, your own projection, right? And this is just to close the cycle. If everything out there happens ultimately in here, other people's projections about you are nothing but your own interpretation of their projections. And that meaning is yours. It's always yours. The meaning of what anything means, it's yours. You create it. The problem, of course, is that you inherit also the interpretation mechanisms and the way to understand and interpret and frame that behavior or that projection. You inherited, right, the way that you should understand certain things. But override that. Dare to reprogram your own mind into thinking and creating meaning that is meaningful to you, that helps you grow, that helps you achieve whatever you want to achieve in life, that allows you to live in alignment with your values, that gives you the courage and the strength to look someone in the eye and, first of all, smile, right? Not in a pejorative way, but really smile. Let them see that you are okay. Let them see that they have no power onto you. Let them see themselves in that smile. When someone throws judgment, when someone casts judgment onto you, or they become aggressive, it's their own struggle, right, that cannot be contained anymore, and it has to go outside. And you happen to be around, so there you go, right? You are the next best thing for them besides their own self-torture, right? There is another human being there. I will just be anger I will throw anger to them. I will show them that I suffer so that they suffer with me as well, so that I can hurt them. So their own suffering, makes me feel like I'm not alone in this pain, right? In this suffering. Find compassion. We are all living the human condition. And part of the human condition is also this kind of emotion that we cannot control. What we feel on the inside and how we feel about ourselves ultimately will be projected onto the world unconsciously by us as we go along. So when people are mean, when people try to threaten you, or they look scary or threatening and so on, they cannot do better. They literally cannot do better. And you find compassion in the understanding that this is a battle that they are fighting with themselves all the time. Because if they would feel good with themselves, if they would be happy all the time, would they still throw, judgment on you, or be angry at you, or scream at you, or make meaning um, like strange comments, or it would not happen, right? So once you find this, then you can really be free, because those things you cannot really control, but you can give in to them if you want, right? And most of the time, if you realize that there is nothing there for you, and you cannot learn anything, and you cannot grow from that experience, and there is nothing in it for you, don't sacrifice yourself to entertain it. It can be even a close relationship. If there is nothing for you there so that it can help you grow and make yourself a better person thanks to that interaction, then why keep maintaining it? The only responsibility you have in this life, according to my own interpretation of things, is that you make the most positive impact you can based on your own understanding of yourself, not from wanting to change the world, because that's an egoistic drive, right? I want to change everyone but myself. No, I can change no one but myself. And when I am in the process of me changing myself, when I say change myself, I'm saying improving myself, like going to the next level of understanding of the world, capitalizing on everything I've built up to this point, honoring this foundation from my past, not discarding anything. I don't want to change because I want to escape or avoid something. I want to improve. I want to grow into my potential more and more and more. Why? Because I can be of more service to the world. And I can then feel better because I know that I can do better, right? At the same time, I know that this will never end. There is no there. There is no absolute perfection in terms of I can get to that point, because that's also conditional and that's also absurd. And this is how we live our lives, thinking that if only I will achieve this much, if only I will get to this place, if only, then I will be worthy of it all. Then I will be worthy of my own appreciation ultimately, because clearly that person will appreciate me because they said, if you reach this milestone, then you are worthy of my love ultimately, right? And then if they love me, then I can love myself. This is all messed up. This is the wrong pattern. It should be the other way around. Be truthful to yourself, be kind to yourself, be generous to yourself, love yourself first, and then that love will also pour into the world. And you will also show others how to live their own lives based on how naturally you live this life, which is supposed to be natural. This way of living is supposed to be natural. It's much more natural to love yourself and don't judge yourself all the time based on what others think about you, but rather based on your own intentions for doing good in the world, right? Your own self-interpretation of your intention. And this is what you can control, right? The intention of doing good and being truthful to yourself is something that you already know, you always knew how to do, and you don't need anyone to tell you anything. to be a good person. You don't need education. You don't need social interaction. You don't need anything. You know how to be good. You know how to be good and kind to the world because you know how to be good and kind to yourself. And that's it. That's all you can control. But we prefer, instead of finding who we are and being truthful to who we are, we prefer of playing the game of everyone else but our own game. Such a crazy thing. So I invite you to reflect on this messed up way of finding yourself in the world from the projections of other people. And this is not how you do it, right? Look at it, inspect it, be curious about your triggers, investigate why are you being triggered at all in the end, and how can you change that? Because you can change it. You are the meaning maker, and meaning is everything. And once you realize this, the world opens up in a different way. I promise. Happy exploration.